Good evening and welcome to my latest video. In this video, we will be assembling Panther tracks. A little bit of history: the Panther tank, originally known as the Panzer V, had three different types of tracks: early, mid, and late. I sell them all on my eBay store, all at the same price, and from what I can tell, you could have a tank with any of them on it and even mixed, especially if it was a repaired vehicle towards the end of the war. They would not have been particular about what tracks that they put onto that vehicle. Like most of my track offerings, when you purchase the Panther tracks, you get two bags of tracks. You get one that is sighted for the left-hand side and one that is sighted for the right-hand side of the vehicle. What that means is one side of the track has been printed with a pinhead so that you don't see the wire going all the way through the track. Whether that goes on the left side or on the right side depends on which way you want to route the tracks on the vehicle. If you want to route it as the Germans were supposed to do it, then what I have labeled as the left will be if you're sitting in the vehicle driving, it's the left-hand side. The right-hand side is, of course, the right-hand side if you're in the vehicle driving. If, however, you are trying to duplicate an exact vehicle out there, they oftentimes put the tracks on backwards because they were either in a hurry or inexperienced crews, various reasons. So if you have a photograph that shows the tracks operating the other direction, then by all means put your tracks on in that direction. That's the beauty of modeling. You do what you want to do in this hobby and you build the kit the way you want to build the kit. If you want to paint it hot pink and call it the Pink Panther, paint it hot pink and call it the Pink Panther. Alright, for this segment of the video, we're going to go over what you need. This is very similar to most of my other track assembly videos because to assemble tracks, it's a pretty straightforward process. You need the tracks that you get, you need some tweezers, you need some pliers, which I prefer these with the bend in the nose. They're needle nose and they have the bend so they're out of your line of sight. You need some snips so that you can snip the wire off from the spool that I give you. I certainly find it easier with some magnification, and in fact I oftentimes team up the magnification so that I can see what I'm doing. These pinholes are tiny, so to line up the wire with that pinhole can be somewhat of a struggle. The hole themselves for the wire and the wire is less than 0.5 millimeter in diameter. So magnification is helpful. You also may need a pin vise. The larger the tracks, so we're getting into Panthers at this point, the larger the tracks, the more likely you're not going to need a pin vise to line them up or to clean out the holes, simply because they're bigger and therefore the holes are bigger and it's easier to assemble them and hold on to them. With these, however, because they are bigger, this is where I find these flat pliers really come in handy for flattening out the wire into segments. If you have a piece of the wire that's bunched up, such as this, these pliers are very handy for just squeezing that wire from a few different directions and getting it relatively flat so that you can use more of the wire and get more mileage out of the wire that you're sent. Regarding the wire that you're sent, it will be either 26 gauge or 30 gauge florist wire, depending upon the version of tracks that you have purchased and the date that I had printed them. When you receive the tracks, you will get a coil of wire within it. If you ever need more wire, simply let me know and I will gladly mail you more wire. If you have problems and need more tracks, then I will send you more tracks. You pay for shipping. I will provide the number of tracks that you need. Like usual, I am sending way more tracks than you need to complete the vehicle. The larger we get though, the lower that ratio becomes. Previously, I would send 150% of the tracks needed for each side of the vehicle, but now that they're getting bigger, I can't maintain that. With Panthers, I'm still sending roughly 150%. But with Tigers, I can't do that because I can't fit that many on the build plate of the printers and continue to provide them at the same price point that I'd like to provide them to you guys and at the same value. This brings up another thing that I want to mention: resin color. This resin is a translucent brownish. Sometimes it's translucent green, sometimes it's translucent clear, sometimes it's gray. It's early 2022, and with the resurgence of COVID around the world, it's getting harder to get some of the supplies that I need, and therefore it makes it hard to get a steady supply of resin that I use. And there's been a drop in quality of the resin that I've been receiving from the manufacturer I've been using for the last couple of years. So I'm having to branch out and try different things. The other point to that I want to make is right here, this block looks like it's all nice and intact, but in fact, when I took it off the build plate, it broke into multiple pieces. I would still mill this block, because if I set every block apart that breaks apart when it comes off the build plate and don't send it out, then I'd have to jack my cost up considerably, because about 1 out of every 6 does not come off the build plate intact. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of the tracks. What broke is just the carrier medium that I use to print it. The tracks themselves are totally fine on that carrier medium. So there's nothing wrong with the product. It'd be like getting a model kit where the sprue has a little bit of damage. So if that's not something that you're interested in, then please bypass my offerings and purchase some higher dollar offerings for old metal tracks, model casting, etc. All right, in this section of the video, we're going to cover removal from the carrier medium and cleanup. Once again, the larger the tracks, the easier this becomes. For a quick example, I'm going to set these aside real quick, and we're going to go through. Today we are assembling Panther tracks. This is what Panther tracks look like when they're assembled. These are the lates, these are the earlies. You can see same exact size. These are Panzer 3/4 tracks. So Panther tracks are almost 2 centimeters wide according to my mat. Panzer 3/4 tracks are just over 1 centimeter wide. Now let's go Panzer 2 tracks. Panzer 2 tracks are just about 1 centimeter wide. Now we go Panzer 1 tracks. Panzer 1 tracks are considerably less than 1 centimeter wide. And then just to throw it all in, just for fun, right next to those Panzer 1 tracks, I'm going to throw Tiger 1. So as you can see, with the Tiger 1 tracks right here, I can put a Panzer 1 track and a Panzer 2 track on top of the Tiger 1 track and still have room to spare. So of course, assembling Panzer 1s or 2s or 3s and 4 are going to be harder than assembling Panthers or Tigers, because you've got more to hold on to. The pinholes can be bigger, the hinge points, there's more hinge points, it's bigger, it's easier to work with in general. So the one thing I should probably point out is, yes, so this is Tiger 1, this is Panther, side by side, but the Tiger did have the transport tracks, which would be smaller than Panther, but still considerably good sized and bigger than any of the previous tracks that I mentioned. So for removal, these are fairly straightforward. You just grab them, wiggle them back and forth a little bit, and they pop right off of the carrier medium. I'm going to assemble 10 or 12 here tonight. Notice I'm not really using tweezers or anything else here. I'm just grabbing them, gently wiggling them, and pulling them off the carrier medium. That's it. So now with these tracks, all I need to do is give them a quick once over, and this is where the tweezers will come in handy, and just make sure I don't have any of the support material, which is this right here that you can see is the support material. It connects into the various parts of the track and helps it as it prints. When it's printing upside down like this on a build plate, and it lifts out of the resin, goes back down, flashes that layer, lifts back out, goes back down, flashes the next layer. So it's actually printing upside down and hanging off that build plate. So these supports are what holds it onto the carrier medium and the build plate and allows it to go through that printing process. It's actually pretty fascinating and really neat. So Here we just need to go through these and make sure that they're pretty well cleaned up. And then this is where your pin vise will come in handy, is just taking your pin vise on some of them and making sure that you can get through the holes, that the holes are indeed open and they don't need to be drilled out. These being as large as they are, probably not going to be an issue. I won't say that every single one of them is going to come open. There will probably be some that have a hole closed, and in that case I would just recommend setting it aside and grabbing a different one. You'll have plenty of extras to use for armor, to use for terrain scatter, or once again to use for replacements if you have some that are in bad shape, broken, didn't come off cleanly, or have a pinhole that's not open. So that's how we do the cleanup. All right, for this section of the video, we're going to be doing the assembly, where we try to put these tracks together. I put on my heavy magnification so that I can really see what I'm doing. And I've got my wire here ready to go. I do find it easier to have a fair amount of wire ready to go, so you're not dragging the wire around and creating grief in that regards. So here we take 2 of the track links. As always, getting them started is the hardest because you're dealing with 2 very small pieces. I like to line them up as best as I can, pinch one in together, and then here we're going to take and just slide the pin vise down in there and make sure we're happy with our depth in case we do need to draw out any holes that we start working on. Now, as you noticed, it went right in. We won't have any problem here. So we've got these 2 lined up. I'm going to remove the pin vise and just set it aside for now. Take my wire, slide it down through there, and like usual, snip it off about a 1/4 inch long. Now for the second link, you want to just grab your second link, and from here it's going to begin to get a little bit easier because you're getting more and more to hold on to. Line it up. I'm going to attempt to do this without even using the pin vise. Grab my wire, slide it in here, hopefully keeping my head out of the way, and cut it off about a 1/4 inch long. So we're leaving these about a 1/4 inch long so that if we need to remove a link because we have a problem, or we break a link, or any reason, we have some flexibility to work with. Or if we found, because we're covering the pinholes, that we didn't actually have that slit all the way in, if we cut it off flush, then it'd be too short of a wire. But where we're leaving it a 1/4 inch long, we'd be able to push it down in there a little bit farther. So now, next one, same deal, line it up. Take our wire, insert it down in there, cut it off a 1/4 inch long. Notice again, I'm using my cheap snips. I'm not using my god hands or extra pointy snips because I don't want to damage them by cutting wire. Also notice that it's getting much faster as I get more built up here. What you'll notice is the link that I'm adding to my existing chain is a link that has the widest hinge point. They're all the same, yes, but on my chain I've got one side that's got the wide hinge points, and then I've got one side with the narrow barrels. I'm adding the wide one to the narrows. The reason why is if I was to push too hard, and I will intentionally do it on this one, I could easily push off one end, and at that point I've broken that link that I was going to add, and I don't want to leave it on there. So I'll just pull that back out, pull off that broken link, and set it aside and be done with it. But I don't have to take off the other one. If I was working from the other end, then I would have broken a link that was already attached to the chain, and I'd have to take off not only the link I just added, but the link previously. So I always work from the wide barrels as my current link. So here, I won't try to intentionally break this one. There we go. Cut it off. That wire was a little bit bent, so I had to wiggle it around a bit to get it to slide through, but that's not a deal breaker. If it's too bent, that's where I use my flat pliers and I straighten it out. Or if I have to, that's where I grab these bent nose pliers and slide it down through here. Now, where I can print them translucently, and here you can probably see it because of the green wire, you can see that green wire down in there. You can see how far down in it is, and that's why I provide them in translucent resin whenever I can, because it does make the assembly a little bit easier. Once you prime these, they're not translucent anymore. That of course goes away with one coat of primer. I once had a customer tell me if he'd known they were translucent, he wouldn't have bought them. And I've since added that to my listing and been very careful to tell everybody, but I don't see what difference it makes, because whether they're black, whether they're translucent, whatever color they are, I would hope you're going to be painting them on your model kit, because nothing I provide them in is going to look realistic. If you have watched any of my other track assembly videos, you will notice how fast this is going in comparison to those other tracks, and it is all because of the size. Not saying they're not still fiddly, because they're individual workable track links. Of course they're going to be fiddly. It's helpful if you don't constantly set your pliers down on the wire that you need to pick up, but at least you can tell I am a creature of habit. I also want to give a special thanks to Kai, aka Tank Brusher. These are some of his designs. I have offered Panther tracks for a long time, but I only offered late because that's all I had designed. He came out with the early and mid offerings, so I was able to add his designs to it. And then as soon as I get my tigers listed, I will be going back through and adding the Mittelstollen, Mittelstollen, etc., which are ice cleats for those of you who don't speak German. I don't either, by the way. All right, there's the last of those that I broke off in that amount of time. $19 links and 11 minutes, so not too bad. Now granted, they're not fully assembled. At this point you would want to trim these a little bit shorter, so I'm going to get out my customary little cup of water here to aid in that. I'm going to grab the link, or grab the wire, pull it out just a hair, snip it off, try to drop it into the water tank. And And I don't worry too much about getting them pushed back in. Unlike some of our smaller tracks, there's plenty of contact points on these, so they're not going to fall right apart in our hands. I think I've hit this pail of water twice. Obviously it doesn't work too well for me. Alright, now this is another place for either your pin vise or your tweezers to come back through here and just reseat these pins. Again, making sure you don't press too hard, because you don't want to break the link, especially at this point, because you would potentially have a harder time taking them apart. And it's for that reason that when I attach the groups of tracks to the rest of the chain, as I'll show you here in a second, I leave a longer wire so that if I do have one that I have a problem with, at the most I'll have to redo 10 to 12 links instead of who knows how many as I try to take them apart. Alright, here I've got another short little run assembled, and here's the run that you just watched me assemble. What I'm going to do is just show you how I link these two together. So it's pretty straightforward, just like before. Put the two together, run my pin in there, but in this case, rather than cutting it off a 1/4 inch, I'm going to cut it off like a good solid inch, and that way I've got an easily marked, easily identifiable spot. I can bend it out of the way, do whatever I need to do. But if I'm going through and I drop them, break them, have a few I need to replace, then I can just grab this, pull it apart, and separate it at one point and only have to replace that section, rather than potentially having to take apart multiple sections and tear apart several links in a row to try to get at one that I happen to mess up or do something wrong with, or not like the looks of, or whatever. Once you prime these and paint them, that's where you'll start to notice that the details really do pop. These are the same tracks I'm working on right here, and as you can see, the details in these are much more noticeable than the details in these. But I want you to notice that even after painting, they are still very flexible, very workable. Not recommended for RC use or as a toy or anything along those lines, but you could definitely have them coiled up at a repair yard. You could definitely have extra links on a repair vehicle, being put on or taken off the vehicle you're working on, whatever you're looking for there. You'll be able to get the exact sag that you're wanting to get out of them. I find that they're to me, they're very enjoyable to assemble, very enjoyable to use, and I really like the looks of them when they're on the vehicle and done. One last point I want to make to you is that before I send these out, I put them through a double alcohol bath system. The first one gets any of the residual resin off of them. The second one is with clean alcohol to get them as clean as I possibly can before sending them out, so that you don't have to worry about having resin and getting the resin on your hands. But after you've been assembling these, you've been running them through your hands and you're getting your personal oils all over them. So at that point, I recommend you clean them however you prefer. You can either mist them down with IPA and let it evaporate off. You can brush them a little bit. You can wash them with your Dawn soap and water, whatever your method is. But just like washing any model, you're going to want to be careful as you're doing so, because they are breakable and you can set yourself back by breaking some of them and having to go back and fix them. One thing to keep in mind, tracks were not perfect. They were the highest wear item on the vehicle. So if you did happen to break off a guide horn, well, these are workable tracks. You could potentially locate that broken link in a place that nobody will ever see it, or you could intentionally locate it where somebody will see the broken guide horn so that it looks like they have a damaged track. They would continue running with that broken guide horn track until it was A, noticed, and B, they had time to do the maintenance and replace that track link. It would not have been an instantaneous thing, most likely, that they just pull over and take the opportunity to fix. And some vehicles would end up throwing their tracks, and that would cause them to be disabled and lost. So a broken link is not always the end of the world, but you do get several extra links so that you can replace them if and when you want to. That's it for this video. Thank you for joining me. Sorry for all the waffling around there. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If so, like, subscribe if you want to, and I will continue to do these how-to videos for my items that I sell, and hopefully someday get back into doing some more build videos for my channel. Thanks, and I hope you have a wonderful 2022. Stay healthy, stay safe.